I'm trying to do a podcast intro, but that's not working. So hi, I'm Elodie Novodatsky, your host for this podcast about the ups and downs of self-publishing. Every first Monday of the month, and spoiler, it's the first Monday of November 2024 as I'm releasing this, we'll also take a look at cancer and creativity, in addition to the ups and downs of self-publishing. I've been self-publishing since June 2014 and was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma in October 2017. After 3 years of on and off treatments, including an autologous stem cell transplant, I've been in remission since spring 2020. If you'd like to know more about me and my books, visit www.elodienovodatsky.com or, thanks to my genius husband, www.dasdog.net, because I kept spelling my name by saying Diasdog. So www.dasdog.net redirects to my website. Today's episode is Gasp. Anxiety and writing did not prepare me for cancer? First of all, let's be clear. How dare anxiety and writing not prepare me for this? Well, for anxiety, I thought we had a deal. You'd give me fears, I'd be anxious about them, I would learn, become a Google MD. Heck, I'd even develop OCD starting young, because why not? And boom, when something happens, I would know how to handle it, like a pro. And maybe sometimes yes, but when I got diagnosed, that plan went out of the window. My brain didn't like that plan, or it skipped that lesson entirely for me because things did not go the way I thought. So the thing is, I like to have, I don't say I want to control things, like not in a scary mind control way, but I try to think, positive, not to stress. I stress myself a lot, but like to prepare myself too. I usually can adapt, find the best solutions, get moving pieces to work. But sometimes when you think your thoughts always mean something, it can become a little bit tricky. And that's a little bit on the OCD side. And I don't always think they mean something, but some thoughts become sticky. So by the way, dealing with OCD, mostly in my very busy mind, has been a work in progress in itself. I almost said a journey or an adventure, but whether we're talking about OCD or cancer, we're not going on a cruise or a holiday here, so I'm probably not gonna use those terms very often. Therapies like ERP and ICBT have made a real difference since my transplant, but when I was diagnosed, my toolbox at the time was much thinner and way out of reach. My brain kind of stuttered, focusing solely on getting to the next day. I even thought my OCD was getting better, not realizing that A, I was so focused on surviving, it kind of slipped through, and B, it did not entirely slip through because some of my thought patterns were actually OCD too, just more subtle. Different theme, same fun. Plus, I wasn't only bringing my current situation to it when it comes to anxiety, I was also bringing some of my past experience with cancer, things maybe I had not worked through. So not my personal, not me having cancer before, but people very close to me. Grief I had not yet worked through either. Things I'm still, I think, processing to a certain extent. So let's rewind a little bit, because a quick recap to put us right in that October of 2017. I was trying to remember what I was working on right before diagnosis. And I had just published Simi Simi Not in August. So I know I was organizing the translations and so on. Plus, I was working at Howard Community College as an adjunct faculty, teaching 2 classes, German 101 and German 201. I attended the Baltimore Book Festival and had my first book club appearance planned. Life was busy, full, and I thought that I was starting to make progress on the self-publishing side. But as you know, things then started to change. I had those symptoms for almost a year. And on October 11th, 2017, I almost had a Mean Girls moment, like it's October 3rd, if you know, you know. But anyways, it was not October 3rd, it was October 11th. This is part of an email I wrote to my husband after an x-ray. My mass is 11.7 centimeters by 8.7 centimeters, and there might be weird lymph nodes in my abdomen, feeling dizzy, but not sure if it's the mass or the stress. Notice the stress. I thought that some of my physical symptoms were actually due to my anxiety. And maybe some of them, like anxiety, compounded some of those physical symptoms. Talking about feeling dizzy, before that scan, I remember teaching and swaying and then having a very strange experience kind of an intrusive thought that seemed super real in the bathroom of the community college, followed by a panic attack. I mean, I knew something was wrong. Like, I've never had that kind of experience. And I think also because I had anemia, because the mass was moving stuff inside, it was probably not helping. And on October 13th, following that very scary x-ray, I had a CT scan, which, well, didn't sound any better. Basically, the mass in my chest was about the size of half a gallon of milk. And I like milk, but not like that. That anterior mediastinal mass was 9.6 centimeters by 7.1 centimeters, but was also growing on the right side of my chest. Hence the pump I could see, and that's not the kind of growth spurt I'd have wanted. If you count that first mass and that second mass, it was approximately 15 centimeters across and approximately 9 centimeters on the other side. And it was pressing on the right side of my sternum, kind of trying to break my sternum, actually. So yeah, that was a fun little tidbit that was just pushing against it, trying to cut it in half. And it was also nearing the superior vena cava, so that's the largest vein in the body. So fun times. The one time I would have liked to not achieve something would have been to not have an overachieving mass. I also had a bunch of pretty large lymph nodes under my armpits, around the mammary area and all that jazz. And then it was time to enter the hospital world. On October 15th, I sent this email out. I had been waiting, crossing my fingers, that I could still drive about an hour to get to a book club where they were reading Fear Me, Fear Me Not. And so I wrote to the book club organizer saying, I'm very sorry, but I have to cancel my participation in the book club on Tuesday. In the past week, I've been from doctors to doctors due to a growing chest mass. It would appear to be cancerous based on what the surgeon could see on my CT scan. He moved our appointment forward as it is quite a large mass and I'm getting surgery tomorrow to get it biopsied. Again, I'm so very sorry. Please convey my apologies to the other members of the book club. Thanks for letting me know you received this email. Elodie. When you get diagnosed, as I said, you enter the hospital world, the cancer center world. It's not Disney World. You become a patient. And this might be in addition to, well, everything else. Or sometimes it feels like it takes over some of your identity. And we'll talk about that more in another episode. And then when it comes to entering the hospital, I thought, okay, now that I'm going into the hospital, it's going to be organized, like I'm going to have the things that I need. I'm going to be surrounded by medical professionals and I'm going to be prepared. Or so I thought. So after the results of my biopsy, the reason why I was admitted to the hospital for my first chemo is because, as mentioned, the mass was pretty impressive. But also when you get chemo for Hodgkin's, there can be an inflammatory process that may make it bigger at first. I might need to write a rom-com about this. Would anyone read it? Let me know. So at first, once I got admitted into the hospital, first of all, we were a little bit worried about how big the mass was and what it was doing to the inside of my body and what we read about the supravena cava and about my sternum, about all of that. So my parents decided, and I'm again so grateful, that they would come and stay with us. They could not come before the first chemo because, again, everything then happened like super quickly and they were coming from France. Actually, my mom was coming from the country of Georgia, from Tbilisi, because she was volunteering at a French school there. And my dad, well, has plenty of responsibilities at the City Hall and stuff. So anyhow, so they were coming. And then we had somebody very dear to us who was also staying sometimes, staying with me so I would not be alone. And then when I entered the hospital, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to be surrounded. Like, I'm not going to be alone, because that was one of the things we were worried about before going into the hospital. And so it felt like go, 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 things were finally moving. And so before chemo and everything, I had a bunch of, I was taking steroids to try to make the mass a little bit smaller before chemo started. And then I had to have a PET-CT scan to see where the cancer was, what stage Hodgkin's was. And my husband was actually allowed to stay in the room with me while I was waiting, because when you do a PET scan, you become radioactive. But you also have to wait for an hour before the PET CT, and different hospitals have different protocols. Sometimes you need to drink something beforehand as well, in addition to what they put in your veins, depending if they do a PET CT or just a PET. And then sometimes you're not allowed to move at all. Sometimes they will let you move a little bit, but like still you have to lay down and sit. Anyhow, my husband was allowed to wait with me and then be in the room with me when the PET CT was happening. I think I remember that. If he listens to that and is like, no, that was the second PET scan, he will let me know. But I also remember that they asked me, like the techs asked me what music I wanted to listen to while I was going through the PET CT scan. I was kind of scared because I had to lay down, but also like I could not lay down all the way. So they were trying to make it so that I could have like my head up a little bit so I could still breathe. And then you're in that, I mean, it's tube, it's not like it's open, so you can go through it and then you go back in. But at some point your head is underneath the tube. So it can be like, if you have a little bit of claustrophobia, it can be a little bit scary as well. So anyways, they were I remember the mood in that hospital PET CT scan was very like happy, like I don't know, there was just a good energy. And they asked me about what singer I wanted. And so I listened to Zaz, a French singer I love. So I was trying to find something like some comfort and something familiar into something that was definitely not familiar to me. The nurses were amazing. So both the one at the PET CT scan, but also at the hospital, like in the room where I was in, the nurses were so kind. Like they were warm and just, very personable. There was one of them, I remember her name was Liz, and she really made me feel seen. She had lymphoma when she was 19 and was doing well. I mean, I guess she was in her late 20s at that time. And she had such an impact on me. Like I felt, as I said, I felt seen, but also I felt like she could see that I was not only a patient, but that I was also a patient, but like I felt whole in a way, because that's something that's very hard sometimes, is when you become a cancer patient. And as I said, I'll talk about identity probably in another episode, but sometimes it feels like that's all people see, but also you want them to see it, but you also want them to see you. And with Liz, I felt all of that, like that she was seeing me. She was also seeing everything that I was going through in my mind. And it meant a lot. So much so that when I had to change rooms and she wouldn't be the one with me during my first chemo, I cried. I was just so sad. Like it was very hard because that connection meant so much. And the other nurses in the other room were also very, very kind. And I mean, it was not all butterflies and puppies, though, even with the nurses or the team there. I had a tech, and I'm sure he was coming from a very good place, but he came to do my electrocardiogram on the side of my bed. And because, again, I had, the thing that was actually pushing against my heart a little bit. So I think there was a bit of fluid by my heart, so they just wanted to make sure that everything was okay before they started giving me chemo. But that tech told me about how his wife died from cancer after trying everything, and then she stopped treatments to do, I think, something with crystals in Italy in a cave, can't remember. But it was not exactly the pep talk I needed to hear at that time. And it's not to deny the fact that there are so many, different experiences. And yes, not every outcome is the outcome that we wish to have for everybody. At the same time, when you're just starting treatment, I had not even started treatment, and you have somebody who tells you about somebody who passed away, you already have your own stories of people you know or people you heard of who passed away from cancer. So I don't feel like you need any additional stories about that. Personally, I did not. Let's put it that way. Especially because the headspace, as I mentioned at the time, was kind of a very strange headspace. Yes, right now, I try to make it a point to, when I think about some people who have gone, and I think about them, and I sometimes think about ways to honor them as well. I want to honor people, when they're here with us, because that's important. Give people their flowers, right? And I also want to honor them. It's going to sound very grandiloquent, but sometimes, I don't think about it all the time, but sometimes in the way that I'm leaving myself. And I talk about writing. I had one of my characters in Fear Me, Fear Me Not, the mom of one of my characters had passed away from cancer. It was something that I think I treated very respectfully, and I wanted to show how grief can linger throughout. I do feel that now that I've experienced this, and I think I've come very far also on dealing with my own grief and over feelings. I mean, I'm not, but I have known people, as I've said before, who sadly passed away from cancer, and writing that story at that time, I mean, I still have one book actually in that series. It's Miss Me, Miss Me Not. And I think this will be more emotional in a lot of ways because I have personally dealt with, I think, a lot of emotions that maybe I had not dealt with. Writing can be very cathartic in a lot of ways. It can be very hard as well. But yeah, writing those characters do not necessarily, I mean, it's something that I bring a little bit of myself in, like my own emotions, my own feelings. I try to see the different sides of how this might impact a lot of different people. And I'm talking, actually, it was the mother in Fear Me, Fear Me Not, who had passed away. She was the mother of one of the main characters in that book. And it was important to me to write that character, to write in honor as well of the people that I know who have passed from cancer. Like, for me, it was also, very important to write that, because I feel like sometimes, I don't want her mom, that person that was the mom in the book, she will never be forgotten. She will be in the life and in the heart of her children, and her passing away does have an impact. And I hope, I've talked about, and I've tried to be also funny and but those are real situations too, right? Even the ones we write about sometimes, yes, we take liberties, but the emotions that we convey, they're human emotions. Why? Because at the time I also wanted to show, right, that cancer impacts everybody in the family. It impacts the cancer patient, but it also impacts everybody around them. And that was also important to me. So I just wanted to put that out there, saying that writing did not necessarily prepare me, but also what I've experienced of seen or did not necessarily prepare me either at that time, at the beginning. And maybe that's what I need to make clearer as well, is that it was at the very beginning. Like, it took me a bit to come to terms, and I'll explain why, and I'll show why, but it took me a bit to come to terms with the fact that I was even going through treatment, and then because everything was going so fast at that time. And so this was a point, or not a point, but something I wanted to also share. And then after that, after the PET scan showed that there was a little bit of SUV, so it was lighting up, in addition to above, the chest area, where I had the big mass, and under my armpits and everything. There was nothing underneath the spleen, but there was in my bone marrow, there was some diffuse reactive something. And so they were not quite sure if it was due to cancer or not. So the question became, should I do a bone marrow biopsy? And it would have been to know the exact stage and to maybe gain more information. If it was to gain more information, okay. If it was just to know the stage, then I probably shouldn't have done it, even though I did do the bone marrow biopsy, because I found something out later. But to do or not to do, that was the question. And I did it. I did the bone marrow biopsy. And I did it without real anesthesia, because apparently Delodid and I are not going to give each other friendship bracelets anytime soon. I started feeling like just very strange, and my heart started racing again. And so they stopped the Delodid. Actually, the nurse had mentioned, because I had not had Dilaudid before, they were giving me maybe too much. And so thanks to the nurse, I was in a situation where they were able to stop giving it to me. And then, but that meant that I didn't really have anesthesia. And giving, something to numb doesn't numb all the way for a bone marrow biopsy. I won't get into too many details, but let's just say that it was not my favorite. So my husband was there as well when they did the bone marrow biopsy. And if you ask him, he'll tell you it was fascinating. It was not, I did not find it fascinating, but holding his hand was everything in that moment. I think I like clutched it very hard. Maybe it was painful, but even just thinking about it makes my lower back just hurt a little. Oh, and I cursed my doctor. I definitely used bad words, lots of them. Like I cursed at him, and then I apologized afterwards. We even laughed about it. I mean, you gotta find things to laugh about. But in the moment, I was not laughing. So then after all of that, I was still at the hospital. I saw another oncologist. I asked him questions because I had started to do a little bit of reading about the different treatments that might be available to me. I wanted to know what he was suggesting. And I was trying to understand the choice behind, his choice. And I was kind of being told, or I got told, oh, you're one of those. And I felt I was kind of being looked down on a little bit because I was just trying to be informed. And I was wondering if I needed a port. My oncologist, the one who was still a student, like a fellow, he had mentioned like, yeah, having a port would be good. We're going to try to schedule this. The other oncologist is like, no, you don't really need a port. Like you're probably going to need only like 6 treatments, maybe even less. Like everything is fine. It's stage 2. Blah, blah, blah. And they suggested ABVD. It was the standard of care at the time. I don't think they had any clinical studies open for that particular cancer for first-line treatment at the hospital. I had read about the so-called German protocol for more advanced stages. But even if I had been an advanced stage according to them, they still would not have offered that particular protocol from what I've gathered. And they told me it was stage 2, which according to my now oncologist, could have been considered stage 4, like previously. Stage 4, or actually just advanced stage, because it was 2XB. That was the actual stage of my Hodgkin's lymphoma when I got diagnosed, because I had B symptom and I had X. It was outside of the lymph nodes. And so 2XB, my current oncologist explained to me, was advanced in a way and would have been considered maybe a different stage earlier, years ago. But just XB probably would have meant that I would have been considered advanced stage. Even though for Hodgkin's, it didn't seem to matter as much in terms of staging, at least, again, when I first got diagnosed. If I had been diagnosed today, I may have had immunotherapy with chemo as a first-line treatment. All that to say that I started doing research. I started trying to be more involved in my care, asking questions. And at that time, I already kind of felt like I was not being listened to or answered, kind of dismissed a little. And that would become a recurring theme in my in the first hospital where I got treated at. So after all of that, the chemo was set for Friday, the Friday right before Halloween. I was so ready. I was going to make a joke about trick or treat, but it was really nothing came to mind. So I was thinking, okay, I'm so ready. I had a plan. I'm going to listen to piano. There are some playlists that you can listen to that are calming music, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to think happy thoughts. I think there was also a game that I was going to play on my phone. I'm going to be a model cancer patient. It's me, I am not the problem. Except when they asked if I wanted something to calm my nerves, I said no, because I hate feeling out of control. I hate feeling loopy. I already had that experience with Dilaudid before for the bone marrow biopsy. But then they gave me my premedications, including one which apparently I was allergic to. And that premedication was one of my anti-nausea medication. It was an allergic reaction to fosaprepitant. Like, boom, I felt like my head was exploding. My heart was racing. Nothing was going according to plan. I had been doing okay-ish before. I even had people visiting me at the hospital saying that I look great, that nobody would know. I have, this mask, but I'm walking, I'm talking. I'm still dizzy. I think they have that I'm a full risk on my door. And then I had to do a cognitive test before chemo, and then a cognitive test, I think, after chemo. So there was something that I had to do to make sure that everything was working. I passed with flying colors. But even with doing okay to a certain extent, I mean, I still had everything else going on, right? So when I got allergic to that fosaprepitant, to that anti-nausea, I felt like could be the end. Like it was, and it's weird to say that out loud, but it felt like such a doom feeling coming over me. And my husband was trying to get the nurses, and then I was able to continue chemo. Like they stopped and they made sure I was okay. They gave me something for the allergy, I think. Maybe they gave me Benadryl and then I became loopy, or maybe they gave me something for the nerves that I cannot remember. All I know is that I did not have enough nausea medication, and I was sick during the night. So I was in the room by myself, holding my bucket, crying, because it was, first of all, being sick is not fun. Going through the allergy reaction when you're getting your first chemo treatment is not fun. Being at the hospital is not fun. The nurse was super kind during the night. She came and reassured me, and she told me I was doing so well, which was actually what I needed to hear at the time, because and that will be another recurring theme, I feel like I was failing. And yes, I think I unpacked some of that during therapy. Therapy is also important. And I thought I knew how to handle anything, but I mean, sometimes it just comes out of the left field and it's something you haven't anticipated. And even though you worried about it beforehand, I mean, I had like health anxiety. I wondered about Hodgkin's lymphoma in the past. And yeah, I still had everything else happening that I did not plan for, didn't know what to do about. The thing that happened afterwards is that I started dropping bowls. And I'm laughing at that because I'm a romance author and I talk about those bowls and I'm here all day, folks. So yeah, anxiety did give me beforehand, give me kind of the illusion that I was prepared. I believe that by anticipating some scenarios, I'd be ready, but cancer did not follow any of the scripts that I'd written in my head. And my mind, while it was going different places, sometimes I'd think something scary, a fleeting thought, and it would stick. And then if I thought it, surely it meant something, right? So that was also not very helpful. My usual coping mechanisms, some of the tools that I had for anxiety and even OCD were out of reach. Also, some tools were not as helpful as they were in the past. Because again, if you asked people that I even worked with, or being in my previous job as a press officer or as a teacher, people did not know that I was anxious. A lot of people don't know that. I also do not necessarily talk about it to a lot of people because that's also a recurring theme. Like I have a very close circle of friends, and because now you're all in my close circle of friends because I opened up, but I'm also sharing things that, again, I'm sharing things 5 years after the fact, and I'm sharing things that I think can be helpful to other people and also hopeful to other people. I'm sharing things that I'm more comfortable talking about with a wider audience, narrower audience. I don't know how many people are listening to this, but I'm just talking to you right now who is listening. And thank you, because it wasn't a novel where I could work through some of my angst. And at the beginning, I couldn't write, and that was another challenge altogether. In the next episode, I'll delve into what happens when you can't do what you think defines you. As I said, when you start dropping balls and kind of retreating into yourself. And yeah, let's explore that identity crisis together, right? That sounds fun. Remember, it's okay to not have all the answers, or I think it's okay to not have all the answers. And if you have any questions, I may not have the answers, but I will try to answer. How many times can I say answer in one sentence? Or if you just like to share your own story, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email me. You can comment on this podcast episode if you're listening on Spotify or on YouTube. And don't hesitate to either subscribe to my channel on YouTube, subscribe to my Substack, join my newsletter, subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening. If you want to subscribe, please do. It's really helpful. If you want to review, that also helps. But mostly, I hope that what I'm sharing right now is making you smile a little bit, maybe make you understand a little bit more one experience, because I don't want to say that my experience is universal. And I just want again to thank you so much for listening. And to all readers out there, happy reading. That's not it. To all writers out there, happy writing. And to everyone, happy reading.